at that. So then, we switch gears. We decided we're gonna talk about hypertrophy. And so the first principle of hypertrophy that you'll see in most textbooks and by most professionals, exercise science professionals, is the principle of specificity. So what is specificity? Specificity is, I'll just read off here, the principle of hypertrophy that addresses how to direct our training for the results we want. So for example, if you want to become an elite level sprinter, you better be doing a lot of sprinting, or you better be doing a lot of sprinting like activities. Really sprinting being probably the best. So you might be saying like, okay, well, sounds obvious. Why is this even a principle? It's like, you're just kind of stating the obvious, but we'll get into that. So my face is covering this, which is awesome. So I'll make myself small, and we'll get into the said principle, specific adaptation to impose demands. So basically this goes like this. So if you're training for hypertrophy, you're training for muscle growth. All right. So we're not the elite level sprinters. We're not trying to, become elite level sprinters. Athletes, we want to train for hypertrophy. We want to grow muscle. That's why we're here. So, with that in mind, your training should be aimed at doing exactly that and directly cause muscle growth, or in service of causing muscle growth. Okay. And so, for example, if we want to grow our legs, what's a good way of doing this? Well, let's say I decide I want to grow my legs. I'm going to barbell squat. Is that part of the said principle? Is that specificity towards hypertrophy, leg hypertrophy? Yes, it is. It definitely is. Squats are one of the, king of all leg movements, right? Okay. So what about if we were doing like, body weight squats, to sort of practice before getting under the barbell? Is that going to cause muscle growth? Likely? No. But they both are specific towards the goal of hypertrophy, in that doing body weight squats can prepare me to do better squats when I get under the barbell, assuming I'm not just extremely weak, and then the body weight squats are actually good for me for muscle growth, but that's not the case. All right. So extra training compatibility and hypertrophy. So what this means, so the application of this very simple concept is basically that there are. So one of the key takeaways that I want you to take from this topic is what we're going to talk about right now, which is that there are a lot of these extra training, activities that we can do. So for example, a lot of people who want to lose weight, they want to do some form of cardio, right? And if you've been sticking around here long enough, or if you've been paying attention on Twitter long enough to the brain trust of Twitter, fitness Twitter, there's always that like 10K steps sort of a thing. Well, there's a reason for that. And the reason is because there are certain types of extra training activities that are more compatible and very, not compatible at all really, for the goal of growing muscles. So, people who say things like, it used to be that you'd say to somebody like, if you run, you won't grow muscle, yada, 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 right? That was like the stigma. And then there was this like counter sort of, reaction where it was like, that's bullshit. I'm jacked and I do run a lot. And it's like, and so you have this sort of like back and forth, and it's like, well, who's right? Who's wrong? It's somewhere in the middle. But the idea of the person who said, if you run or whatever, if you do these high endurance sports, like, so for example, if you triathlon, distance swimming, distance running, distance cycling, these kinds of activities are actually, they're going to make muscle growth a lot harder, because how it works is that you're basically competing for, recovery resources. So if you're lifting for hypertrophy and you get the sort of muscle tears that come along with, doing sort of like, weightlifting, leg exercises, right? Like, let's say squats, for example, again, the kinds of damage you do to your muscle that can lead to recovery, and therefore adaptation, can get actually interrupted, or it competes for sort of recovery, for lack of a better term, like resources of recovery that will actually make muscle growth a bit difficult. It'll actually interfere with that, the adaptation and all the rest. So this is why low at the very bottom end of this of the image here, you see in the most compatible in the most compatible you have low impact hobbies. I like the word hobbies there. Light day hiking, frisbee, yoga, etc. So let's just, I think it'd be interesting to go down this. So we talked about endurance sports already, triathlons and all that. It's like, so endurance sports are probably, there's a reason why endurance athletes are usually pretty skinny. There's a reason why Usain Bolt, who may have extremely, like defined muscles, and his legs might be pretty big. If you do it long enough, your legs will get very big. The cyclists and stuff like that. It's another example. But there's something extra. I'm convinced there's extra, leg exercises that they do for that go beyond just cycling. I could be wrong, but yeah, if you do something long enough, yeah, your muscles will grow. But a lot of track athletes and stuff like this, growing up, like high school and college and stuff, these people, they're typically pretty thin, and it's for a reason. Combat sports, MMA, boxing, BJJ. So this one's kind of like it's a little not controversial. It's true, but it is true. It's not that compatible. In fact, the MMA guy should probably be doing more on the low end of the rep ranges, meaning more strength training. It's probably better for them. But that's a whole other topic that maybe we'll get into one day. But just take it on faith for now. Team sports, soccer, baseball, so all like the things you watch on TV. I don't know about baseball though. Maybe baseball, not so much. Glycolytic sports, track, cycling. So like I guess these are like sprints in some fashion. 200 meters swimming. It's not long distance swimming. In other words, it's not like you're not tracking like gazelle in the outback or whatever. It's a good example of why we need endurance, the way that humans have the kind of endurance that we have. But anyway, like I guess this is like mid-range. This is like mid-range running and swimming. Gymnastics, sports, gymnastics, parkour. Gymnastics, you actually do see a lot of like those gymnasts who are pretty jacked actually. So this is like somewhere in the middle range. They're very lean, these guys, but they actually, their arms especially, are very big, and a lot of people think that's like an ideal body type, and it definitely is. But they're always talking about like Olympic level gymnasts. It's like, yeah, Olympic anything is ideal, like obviously, and yeah, they're short as well, so they're going to hell. What else? Strength sports. So it's interesting, right? Strength sports is on the list of things for hypertrophy. It's actually pretty close. It's towards the bottom half of compatibility. So there is that overlap, of hypertrophy and strength training that is known, and this is strongman, powerlifting. A lot of these guys, they grow muscle. They do. Is it as good as hypertrophy training? Bodybuilding? Not exactly, but they're pretty high up there. Power sports, weightlifting, high jump. So basically, weightlifting is good for weightlifting. It's like, yeah, I know. Technique-based sports, table tennis, golf. So these are table tennis, golf. These are like very, very leisurely activities. And then the low impact hobbies, like walking. This is why a lot of people talk about how your 10K steps, this is why they're good for you. 10K steps for your training for hypertrophy. You get your cardio, meaning you can cut out some calories for the day, and get the kind of benefits that you get from cardio. But also it also works towards it doesn't interfere, in other words, with the kind of recovery and adaptation that comes from the micro tears that come from lifting weights. The degree to which exercises in the gym carry over is well displayed here in this chart below. It shows that the most specific to improving the squat is, drumroll, the squat. And adjusting the type of squat adjusting the type of squat has the most carryover aside from the lift itself, while anything leg specific outside the squat variations and the squat itself have a much less carryover to the squat. So the idea is this: if you want to get good at the leg press, like the standard leg press, like meaning get good, meaning progress in your ability to lift and all that, what do? What thing can you do that will make that activity improve over time better? The thing itself. And this is like the whole specificity, this is the whole concept behind like, directed adaptation and the SAID principle and all this stuff. It sounds so obvious, and it is obvious, but this is the application sort of with your training. So it's like, so for example, like I said, if you want to, improve your leg press, you do your standard leg press. But if you want, okay, so what if I do sumo leg press or put my feet really high and do those? Will that help improve my standard, leg press? Not as good as doing it the standard itself, but it will definitely attribute to helping your lift. Now, how about like leg extensions? It's like, will that it will work your quads, but will it really do as good a job as the other the variation and the lift itself? No, it won't. It won't. So it's a very like a pedantic point, but it has to be said. All right, so directed adaptation. Sorry, I used the word directed adaptation earlier, and it was in the wrong context, but it sort of applies. But anywho, directed adaptation. So consistency in our training. Okay, this is another aspect of the principle of specificity that it's almost like programming theory. Like if you're going to program somebody's workouts, part of this principle is programming theory. How should I program this across the weeks? And if you've been paying attention to our programs, you'll notice like, hey, we've been doing a lot of the same lifts week to week. Mike's getting lazy. And there was a time where maybe that was true, maybe a week or two. But no, it turns out the more lazy I am, the better it is for everybody. So what does this mean? So how do we direct our training to be the most specific towards muscle growth? Well, it turns out being hyper consistent in our routines is the best strategy for that goal. Okay, so sticking with the same exercises for periods of time allows us to practice and improve technique on those movements, and improving, and also improve my muscle connection and all the rest. It gives us time to get good at lifting the weight as well as progress with the weight. And so too much week-to-week variation in both exercises, in both the exercise variation and also the rep ranges, gets in the way of these accumulated improvements. So there's a reason why. So what are the applications of this? Okay, there's a lot of them, right? We already went over a couple. There's the improved technique and getting a lot of practice. There's the improved mind-muscle connection aspect of this, meaning that you have a better connection when you're moving the weight to the actual muscle being moved. So again, if you're unfamiliar with this term, mind-muscle connection, it just means basically that when I'm doing a chest press, do I just mindlessly press the weight and hope that it hits my chest? Or do I actually actively activate my chest muscles, throughout the movement? It's almost like, you put this sort of way they put it, like you put yourself in the muscle. So it's like, okay, so that's my muscle connection. So that improves with each iteration of each week, doing this movement week to week to week to week. That improves over time as well. But there are other applications of this as well. Rep ranges, for example. Rep ranges need to be consistent week to week. If you're doing 10 to 12 reps 1 week, and then you're in the 15 to 20 the next week, well, first of all, you're not getting a stimulus. You're not getting the same stimulus, unless, of course, the objective is to build up in reps. That is one example in which that's okay. But typically it's, raise the weight, but the point is that you don't want to move in an extreme example from doing the sort of strength training rep ranges to suddenly doing the hypertrophy rep ranges. So you don't want to go from doing 3 reps, of deadlift to suddenly doing 10, at maybe a lighter weight or something like that. Those are 2 different goals, 2 different weeks. And so that kind of thing is just sort of like you're getting in your own way. Now, in terms of variation, we went over variation. The other thing is the way that you perform the reps. We've talked about this a lot actually, but it's worth reiterating. It's like the way that you perform the movements actually is going to have a big part in how how you can track your progression. So if one week you're doing, dumbbell curls, for example, and you get like 15 reps, and you get 15 reps because they look like, something like this, like 2, 3, 4. But then like the next week, you're slow on the contractions. And then you come up for a big squeeze, slow on the eccentric negatives. And then you come up for a big squeeze, right? And your form, your technique, your approach, your tempo is totally different week to week. Well, you're not going to be able to track your progress really effectively in that case. So there's a lot of applications in which this consistency in our training is important. And so this is, directed adaptation. And then just to wrap up really quickly, everything we talked about, this is the first principle for many, Eric Helms, Mike Israetel, these guys, the first principle in a lot of their books is the principle of specificity. And that is, it emphasizes the training should align with the desired outcomes, such as muscle growth in our case. And if your training doesn't align with your goals of muscle growth, you are not adhering to the principle of specificity. Okay? And so extra training compatibility, like we talked about, you want the things you're doing outside of your training, especially cardio related, to not interfere with your training goals. And directed adaptation is just a facet of specificity that recommends consistency and progressive training over a period of weeks and months for optimal adaptation. So that is the principle of specificity. So that's number 1, because without that, there really is no addressing anything really. It's like, because if you're all over the place, then how do you, the next week I'll give you a spoiler where it's progressive overload. That's principle number 2. Well, how do you direct progressive overload without specificity? You can't.